What's up guys, it's Fahrenheit back again with another video. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to get back into these Bayonetta Theory videos. There's still a few more I want to do, so let's kick it off again. Following Cleopatra, now let's talk about the shamanist Queen Himiko. Now, Queen Himiko existed around the 2nd century of the Common Era, and that was an interesting time because Japan, known as by the Chinese as Wa, they didn't record their own history during that time, and so much of the history or the things about Himiko that is known to us now throughout history has actually been recorded by the Chinese, and there's a lot of details that are probably missing because the Chinese were kind of like outside, like on the outside looking in. You know, they weren't in Japan, they were the Chinese, and they conducted some business with Himiko and her people, but they didn't know maybe a lot of details. And when they did refer to Queen Himiko and their people, they referred to them kind of in passing, not in a whole lot of detail. But that combined with historical findings over the years is pretty much what we have to go on when it comes to Queen Himiko. Before I get into the theory itself, I want to give a bit of context on Queen Himiko. So around the mid to late 2nd century, the land of Wa, in other words, ancient Japan, was going through a conflict. They were lacking any real leadership, and that was causing a lot of conflict within the land. So around 189 or 190 CE, the Common Era, Queen Himiko was deemed fit to rule. Now, from my understanding, this was due to her, at the time, I think being around her teenage years, she had displayed magical abilities, at least was able to convince people that she had these abilities, that wowed people, that made them believe she was fit to rule them. Just like a lot of countries and you know, throughout history, you know, in ancient times, religion and the spiritual world seemed to be a big part of how people felt kings and queens and rulers were chosen. The general public would look at a king and consider them, or a queen and consider them, relative of the gods, or a reincarnation of the gods, or something like that, you know, blessed by the gods, you know, things like this. And that's oftentimes how a lot of these kings and queens seem to have gotten into power. It's because they were associated with the gods. And that seemed to possibly be the case with Himiko in the sense that it's possible that people would identify her with the goddess Amaterasu. So once Himiko displayed her supernatural abilities, she was deemed worthy to rule over the land of Wa, and I believe Yamatai in particular. After that, it seemed as if her people treated her as a sacred treasure of sorts, because she, for the most part, seemed to stay in seclusion in a palace or a temple, guarded heavily by, you know, armed guards and, you know, these watchtowers. And so they were keeping, it seemed like they were keeping a strict eye on making sure no one could get in or out of her palace. Now, I imagine this is because they felt that because of her seeming magical abilities that were possibly associated with the gods, that she needed time to pray, you know, on her own and do her magical rituals and whatnot, perhaps for the prosperity and the good fortune and peace of her country. And so they would leave her to that, which was probably a means to make sure that nobody disrupted her prayer and ultimately the peace and prosperity of their country. Now, it was mentioned that Himiko, because she was a shaman, a queen, and was for the most part kept in seclusion away from the public eye, she had many others that would do things for her. It's mentioned that Queen Himiko had 1,000 female attendees, and depending on which ancient text you read from, they say that she had either 1 or 2 male attendees. The one that's mentioned to definitely have existed, or at least is agreed upon between the different Chinese texts, is that Queen Himiko had 1 male attendee that would provide her with food and clothes. So other than this one particular male attendee, it doesn't seem like too many other people would see Queen Himiko very often at all. And so it sounds like she didn't make too many public appearances. She was very much like a sacred treasure, kept away from the public eye. Although she did have a brother who would relay her message to the people on her decisions on politics and certain things like that. But be that as it may, even though the brother was the one that people would see delivering the message, it seems like he may have been no more than the one relaying her message, because in terms of her people, it seemed her people in the land of Wa and Yamatai or what have you truly believed Himiko to be their ruler. So much so, in fact, that once Queen Himiko died, she was followed to the grave by 100 of her attendees, which probably means that they were 100 people sacrificed in her honor after her death. Okay, so now we get to the theory. To kick that off, let's look at the description where Queen Himiko is mentioned in Bayonetta. So in Bayonetta, Queen Himiko is mentioned for the accessory, the Evil Harvest Rosary. And in the description, it says, Evil Harvest Rosary. Magical beads crafted by the witch Akko while in the service of the ancient Japanese Queen Himiko. When its user dodges incoming danger, the beads will launch a magical counter-strike against the attacker. While the attack is incredibly powerful, it sucks the emotional strength from its user, stripping them of the ability to activate witch time. Now, for me, when reading that description, the thing that I found the most intriguing was the fact that the one who's considered to be the witch here, with the magical powers, was someone named Akko. Now, I did a search on Akko, and I didn't find anything, okay? I didn't find anything on, some historical figure named Akko in Japan. I didn't find anything like that. Maybe there is, but I didn't find it. I mean, even with Queen Himiko, there's really not that much information on her life because not that much of her rule was recorded. And she was the queen. She was the ruler of Japan. So even if there was someone named Akko during ancient times in Japan when the land of Japan was known as Wa, if she wasn't the queen and we barely have any information on the queen, of course we're not going to have much, if any, information on some random Japanese woman named Akko. Maybe she existed, maybe she didn't, but I wasn't able to find anything on that. But if you read the description, it mentions that the magical beads were crafted by the witch Akko while in the service of Himiko. Now that's interesting because the ancient Chinese texts in history describe Himiko as the one with the magical abilities. But the description in Bayonetta describes a witch named Akko with magical abilities. It doesn't say anything about Queen Himiko being an Umber Witch. And as far as we know, in Bayonetta, there's not too many different kinds of beings with magical abilities. There's the gods, angels, the demons, and then there's humans. And based on the lore that we're given in Bayonetta 2, it's mentioned that Aesir created humans. Humans, because they were given the eyes of the world from Aesir, they began to make their own choices, and they basically started to cultivate and learn how to farm, and they learned other forms of very basic levels of technology and speech, communication, and along with that, the original humans, the first humans, they started to develop magical techniques, that they created. There was the ones with the right eye and then there was ones with left eye, and they both created their own forms of magical techniques. So that means if you're a human performing magical feats, then you have to be either a witch or a sage. And if you think about it, if Queen Himiko was such a powerful magical woman as she was revered to be, then why would she have someone else make her a rosary imbued with magic? Why couldn't she just do that herself? She's this all-powerful, sacred treasure of a woman. She should be able to do these things on her own. There should be no one else in all of Japan or within Wa that was fit to perform these feats other than Himiko. That's why she was the one considered worthy of being queen. So that means in Bayonetta's version of Himiko, it sounds like there was someone named Akko who was performing magical feats for Himiko. So that's the thing that I find interesting. So maybe in this version of Himiko within Bayonetta, Himiko doesn't have any powers. She doesn't have any abilities at all. Maybe she's a figurehead. And the whole time, there was this little Japanese woman who was performing the magical feats for her. And she was doing it in a type of ventriloquist type of way, where she was just like a ventriloquist can throw his voice or her voice. Maybe Akko was able to perform these magical feats, but make it seem as if Himiko is doing it. So this is just me making a quick fan theory here, but Himiko, I believe, was first found out about around the time when she was a teenager. When she was first discovered, or at least when she's first written about in the Chinese text, she was, I believe, a teenager around 190 CE. During that time, maybe she had already befriended Akko. Maybe, let's say, Himiko realized the upheaval of her country, realized how, there was no leadership and people were just ravaging in the streets, going crazy. People were getting hurt and killed. Families, were starving, and it was just chaos. And she realized that they needed a ruler. They needed someone to give them peace, something to believe in. And Himiko realized this, but maybe Akko was the one to have these abilities. Maybe they were friends, or they met each other and they were younger and they were friends, and Himiko realized Akko could do something with her abilities. She could change their country for the better. But Akko, she realized that she didn't want to be revered as a goddess or a queen and be locked down in seclusion. And she wanted her freedom. She wanted to see the sky. Maybe there's certain things. She was still young and she still wanted to do things. But Himiko wanted to help her country. So maybe Akko and Himiko came to an agreement. Himiko would attempt to become the leader that her country needed, and Akko would assist her behind the scenes, casting magical spells and using her abilities, but making it seem as if Himiko was performing them. This way, all of the attention and adoration would go to Himiko, while Akko would know that not only is she helping her friend, but she still gets to maintain a certain degree of her freedom. Once Himiko rises to power and becomes the shaman queen of the land of Wa, ancient Japan, Akko becomes one of the 1,000 female attendees. This way, she's hidden in plain sight and no one ever thinks twice about her. And during the rare occasion that Queen Himiko needs to make a public appearance, Akko, amongst the 1,000 female attendees, is performing the spell behind the scenes while Himiko seemingly displays these magical abilities. The example I made here is with this concept sketch you guys are seeing on the screen. The idea was that I was using this as an example with Himiko presenting her people, maybe one of her greatest warriors, with the ancient sword Shuraba. And the sword Shuraba it's a soul consuming sword. Like, it consumes souls, and it'll pull your mind into ruin. Basically, you can't wield it unless you're of great discipline and magical and mental awareness, and you're a trained warrior to the highest degree, right? And so someone like Himiko in Bayonetta, if she's a normal woman, she would be completely pulled into complete ruin if she tried to wield that blade, right? It would pull her soul right out of her body. So the idea in the sketch is that she's brandishing this blade, she's presenting it to her people in this majestic way, all the while hidden in plain sight is Akko, the one actually performing the spell, which is keeping Himiko safe from having her soul sucked from her. So that's the theory, guys. It's Himiko, this sacred treasure of a queen who was adored and revered as the woman who was able to bring peace to their land and prosperity, using perhaps these magical abilities that people may have thought were something that was like a blessing from the goddess, maybe Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun. Beautiful, majestic goddess of light. All the while, it was this little Japanese woman hidden in plain sight that was using dark magic to bring prosperity to their land. So that's the theory, guys. What do you guys think about that? Do you have your own spin on that? What are you guys' takes on Queen Himiko and Bayonetta and what she was like, and who Akko was, and maybe what kind of character dynamic they might have had together, if at all? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. If you liked the video, give it a like. And yeah, guys, I'll catch you in the next video. This is Fahrenheit, signing out.